The breeze topic number 2 is the African mode of production. Of course, this comes with a link. And you guys can continue the conversation on that first prompt in the chat. Not a problem. Go for it. Should raise topic number 2. African mode of production.
Yeah, African mode of production, or AMP, is the way African political economies were organized in pre-colonial times. The AMP is composed of 5 elements. These 5 elements govern African political economies in the pre-colonial period. The first element of the AMP is generalized labor. This was public collectivized labor without pay for public infrastructure projects with the assurance of collective ownership of that infrastructure upon completion. Here we see the historical birth of the commons. Prominent examples of this generalized labor process are the Men's Dam, commissioned by Nasut Namr in ancient Kemi, along with the development of revolutionary Somalia under Siad Barre, as well as the Great Wall of Benin. The second feature of the AMP is the Universal Commons. Edward Blyden, in his work African Life and Customs, describes the inherent communalist component of African life in that all water, land, and employment existed and was distributed in a commons. This means that these were public resources used for the benefit of everybody, and that nobody in these African societies was meant to be left behind. The third element of the AMP is the domestic economy in rural regions. Cheikh Anta Diop, in his books Pre-Colonial Black Africa and the Cultural Unity of Black Africa, spoke about how the domestic economy in Africa was the diametric opposite of the capitalist economy, meaning that in rural areas of Africa, the economy functioned along familial lines. Families took care of each other. Families helped each other. Families pulled their resources together to strengthen their cultural ties. This is a quintessential feature of African political economies. The fourth feature of the AMP is the metropole. Now, today, when we look at the world and examine these metropolitan areas like New York, LA, DC, Paris, Tokyo, Rio, and Dubai, etc., we think that these originated with the West. But according to Cheikh Anta Diop in his book Civilization or Barbarism, the concept of the metropole as the focal point of the political economy originated in Africa. Common examples of African metropoles are Menefer in ancient Kemi, Kerma in Kush, Ile Ife of Oyo, and Fumban among the Bamun. The fifth element of the AMP is private sector socialism, or an economic democracy ran by workers based upon local traditions. This is private commerce with cultural regulations. This is what many African people know today as Susu. It was the way that African people planned their economy for preordained results that would benefit their community. They used customary regulations to develop their economy to produce optimal goods and services. This type of commerce within the AMP did not necessarily include the state at a macro level. However, local communities functioned as a micro-state. Dr. Okoth Agenda uses the inverted pyramid concept to illustrate the way land tenure functioned in pre-colonial Africa, with the immediate family having dominion over local decisions, ancestral lineage in the middle, and the general community at the foundation. A contemporary example of this are the Council Protocols of the Jamahiriya, formulated under Muammar Gaddafi's Third International Theory. Here, the occupational elements of social relations are more important in the provision of land access than private ownership. Dr. Asenji Afana in The Economy of West Africa, Perspectives on Development, affirms that Africa had experienced all types of pre-capitalist social formations, from small-scale communalism to large empires. In the 19th century, most of the civilizations on the continent were clan democracies. Though these clan democracies were slight deviations from the AMP in its most pristine state, Asenji Afana analyzes their African origin using the following 4 elements: Jus sanguinis, or parentage-based nationality, and the absence of state intervention in local commercial affairs, a gerontocracy and diplomatic treaties based upon cooperation and shared responsibilities, the existence of countermeasures against corruption by deep state institutions, and social life regulated by public opinion and pre-established conventions. According to Afana, the lack of class antagonisms in pre-colonial Africa originates in the absence of capital penetration on the continent. Capital is created when surplus value is secularized and individualized. In African economies, currencies functioned as commodity equivalents with sociocultural significance that did not exist within a capital circuit. Here, surplus value was collectivized and distributed to the less fortunate. The structural utility of these currencies was made to move goods and services throughout regional zones to the benefit of the society as a whole. Some examples of African currencies are salt, cowries, gold dust, metallurgical items, and even fabric squares called chiguia. There is even an example of checks being used in pre-colonial Africa. Chancellor Williams, in his book Rebirth of African Civilization, states that capitalism did not exist during the Middle Ages. The usage of currencies for profit did not exist prior to the 12th century, and during this period, money was not a god nor the chief determinant and measure of values and success. From the 14th century onward, the desire for profit became the most powerful motive in the lives of men, and this is what led to the development of capitalism in the late 15th and early 16th century, coinciding with the Ma'afa and the international enslavement of African people by the ever-expanding European empires. Mama Marimba Ani states that the kuntu, the modality of expression, or conceptual modality, can be limiting or it can be liberating. The kuntu of capitalism is exploitative. It acts to mold the consciousness to perceive human relationships in terms of material power over the other. It is a modality of control. One of the most important connections between Christianity and technology since the colonial period is that missionary Christianism paves the way for capitalism and the European-centric market economy. Now, this draws a connection between the growth of the imperialist religions from the standpoint of Europe and the loss and the degradation of our original African systems of divine kingship. Dr. Walter Rodney, in his book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, splits the African mode of production in the following systems: the Remen-Kimi system, the Nubian system, the Ethiopian system, the Maghreb system, the West African system of the Oya and Senegal River valleys, the Interlake Stream Zone system of the Great Lakes region, and the Zimbabwean system. All of these systems are defined by ecological and environmental veneration as a central component of the economy. According to Walter Rodney, though Africa was not capitalist, thriving commercial sectors, moneylenders, and strong handicraft industries were prominent elements of the AMP. An example of this is the Dahomey Cowrie storage house called the Aquejo that were designed for protection from fire and theft. Their owners functioned as money holders for others who deposited their savings in the storehouses of their wealthy neighbors for greater security. These savings were used in loans to third parties. The primary difference between this system and modern banking is that these money holders charge depositors for using their storehouses rather than using interest to attract funds. Now, this has been a brief overview of the AMP. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.
So I already see where folks aren't liking what they think is the socialism in this piece, but I want to put it up because we have continental Africans who pass through an educational system, history classes. I want to see how well it matches up with their understanding, and I also want to see. I also want to see what is still useful and what can be used today. A lot of people don't like socialism when they hear anything around it. I do believe what was being discussed was really communalism. But a lot of people hear socialism and think, well, now I just have to eat a slice of bread and have to share with everyone else. That's not really the truth of communalism. We've heard Gas talk about this a lot between the Black Pentagrammers and his appearances here, on how traditional Africa used to be in terms of you sold the surplus or what have you. So you still made your bread. After you were able to feed everyone, you could still make your bread. That's not changing anything. But this thing that we're under now, this creation of the white man that we're under now, this thing of dog eat dog, that's unnecessary, and they know it's unnecessary. Listen, I was in the hospital the other day visiting someone, and the person they brought out 2 drinks of glucerna for this person, right? And I heard the nurse say, "Oh no, if you don't drink those, we throw it away. We don't take it back anywhere. Once it goes to a patient's room, if they refuse it, then we just throw it away." And I'm thinking, man, how many people are refusing this shit that's just being tossed away, but it's justified in this reality that we live in. It's justified. There's folks who can't afford to buy that stuff to regulate their blood sugar. Fuck it, we'll throw it away by the dozens. We'll throw it away by the dozens. But community doesn't deal in that way. Community will say, okay, well, since you guys in here didn't want, we'll find some less fortunate or someone so that the labor that went into this thing to produce this thing isn't wasted and someone can benefit. But that's not what the reality that they have us living in looks like right now. It's justified for people to be destitute on the street and starving and dying. That's silliness to me. That's silliness to me. From what I understand, we didn't originally have that kind of concept amongst ourselves before we interacted with these people. So I'm going to be very curious to hear from our continental Africans. In fact, let me start now. Let's hear from Brother Tezzy. Tezzy, what say you to what you just saw, the African mode of production? Was that sensible? Are we capable of going back to that? Speak to us on your thoughts about it. Is Tezzy not there? That great introduction. Gas them up. Are you there?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. What say you to what you just saw?
No, I think, listen, for me, I'm not, let me just put it out there. I'm not smart. I'm just a guy who copies smart people. So for me, though, just my little opinion is that this is a great starting point. And I think for me, my criticism oftentimes is people stay at the starting point, right? It's a great starting point. I think Tam will do a great job exploring, because, we've talked about, like, for example, when we say Newtonianism, right, we talk about mass. Newton also injects the idea of limits, right? And Koku, you're a science guy. You know about his idea of calculus and limits. And then you know about these Cartesian coordinates, right? This X and Y axis. So when you impose or you merge the two together, this Newtonian concept of limits, and you mix it with, that's where we get our modern day, the parabolas and all these things. And that's where you get your demand and supply, right? But here's the kicker. Here's the real conspiracy, right? That not conspiracy, but everyone knows, right? For the most part, or we should be aware that Adam Smith is the guy who talks about what? The so-called wealth of nations. Adam Smith, right? But here's what most people don't know. Adam Smith basically took Newton's theory and applied it to so-called human economics. I'm going to say that again. People don't realize that Adam Smith was basically rehashing what Newton had already created in his worldview with his, Newtonianism, and just said, I can apply that to man. And it's not a coincidence that this is birthed, and that's where Foucault comes into play with the order of things, right? Where you get all these words, biology, sociology, right? Anthropology. But what is that ology? They say it's logic or the study of, but no, logic is it's deeper than just the so-called study of, right? Because when we're looking at logic, now we got to look at people like, Bertrand Russell. We got to look at Wittgenstein and and how they're, because the West, these logisticians, and Tan is way more advanced than me in this stuff. Right, she can break all this stuff down. So this is what's going on when we think of so-called political economy. That's totally devoid. That entire discourse, everything I just said, you can't say this in any African language. Now, what we've done a lot of times is we transcribe or we transliterate or we find examples, and we try to use those examples as translations. And so the one example on the show with the Black Panthers, we talked about prostitution, right? So the European will say, oh, it's the world's oldest profession. No, that's your oldest profession. No woman in Africa was shaking her ass for 5 calorie shells. Why would she? She wasn't hungry. She wasn't starving. There was no woman, that's unmarried, some single mother with 3 kids in the village running wild, talking about, village star, that didn't exist, right? So what the modern African will try to do is he might find one off example of something and then try to say, well, let's merge them together. The best example of what I'm saying, and I know I'm saying a lot, but if you look at with so-called religion, the missionary Samuel Ajayi Crowther amongst the Yoruba, he says that Eshu, because he couldn't find an example of the so-called devil or Satan in the Bible, but the closest thing he could find was the trickster deity called Eshu, which is also the crossroads. Ironic, Eshu, ESU, is also found in Jesus or Jesus, and Eshu is the god of the crossroads. And Jesus died on the cross. But that's neither here nor there. I don't want to get pentagrammar on you guys, right? Let me get back to the economy. So you can see what happens when we make those mistakes. So now many Africans today, particularly Nigerians, Yorubas, they say, in Jesus' name, Eshu, I cast you, Eshu, I bind you, Eshu. And say, what the hell are you talking about? Eshu ain't the devil. Are you on drugs? But you can't tell them that. They believe it, but Eshu doesn't mean devil. Even the word devil just means doer of evil. Satan means adversary. The Catholic Church will tell you that there's no hellfire. Jesus didn't believe in a hellfire. There's no hellfire in the Hebrew worldview, right? So the rudiments of these people's discourse, we have to be very, very careful of engaging with this. So now, I said all of that to say, it is a starting point, this video. We didn't have an economy. I can even push and say, like he mentioned the Benin moat. The Benin moat was not built to aid the state. It was built to keep people in because people were escaping Benin. My people left Benin, the Isokos, the Urobos, the Ishans. They were leaving Benin en masse because there was an issue with the Ogisos and the Iwekwe dynasty, the current Oba, right, in Edo today. And so people were leaving en masse, so he built that moat to keep people in. It was actually to keep people there. With that said, we didn't have an economy. Nobody was sitting down there trucking and bartering goods. We didn't have Homo economicus in Africa. It didn't exist. People lived on the land. They followed the rains. And that is why Africa has the most genetic diversity in the world. There's more genetic diversity in Africa than the rest of the world combined. It's not a coincidence, right? They have the tallest people and the smallest people. Thinnest people and probably the fattest people, even though I think some other groups have beaten them now, right? So the point is that when we say these things, we had an economy, what we're doing is we're taking modern day conceptions and we're pushing them backwards, and that's a problem. We shouldn't be doing that. I think we can do that again on an introductory level to, get us as a map to get us away from the Muzungu. But when we're really doing the real scholarship, we have to be very careful of those things. So I don't agree that we had an economy. Nobody was trading goods to, like a supermarket like eBay. No, people had land. They grew what was on their land. They ate. And what was extra, if you wanted to, you went to the markets, and the markets were regulated. Right? Some groups had a 5 market day week. Some had a 3 market day week. Some had a 4 market day week. Right? Time was flexible, even though time doesn't exist, but it was flexible. They bent time depending on where you were. Right? So these are all things. Currency, for example. Right? Cowries. Cowries are not native to West Africa. There's only one species. Almost all the cowries that are in West Africa today are imported. They imported billions, if not trillions. What did that do? That monetized the African economy. And I argue that things like Susu and all these debt relations are as a direct result of this commodification of the West African economy, which is the underpinning and the fight that happened along the lines of that so-called slave trade, the real slave genocide. You had those who did not want to go along with the Muzungu system, and you had those who wanted to go along with the Muzungu system. And there was a lot of betrayal that was going on. And there's so many examples of that. You can read the book, The Two Princes of Calabar. So why were these? There's a great article. What did the Africans get for their so-called slaves? A master list. You can read it. It's on Google. It's a PDF. Great article. You can check it out and start seeing. They got top hats, mirrors, pipes, guns, all these commodities from the West. These African prints that you see everybody wearing. Oh, so beautiful, colorful. It comes from Holland. It's Dutch West Africa print. They were trying to give that to the Indians. The Indians had Madras cloth. The Indians said, hell no, I don't want it. We ain't buying that crap. They said, who's the next best thing? And then, black people. So I'll stop talking, but, remember earlier, on the earlier episode, I said we didn't have an economy. The idea of an economy is a European thing, and everybody was up in arms. I hope I may have explained it a lot better, but I'll stop talking for now.
No, I appreciate that. That's why I wanted to bring this topic from last week, because hold on a second. I wanted to bring this since last week because I do want to hear from the continental Africans on, how this vibes with their understanding of history, etc. So I appreciate that, Gas. Who was it who was speaking just now?
Yeah, it's me. I'm sorry. I missed the question there. I was actually catching up on the video.
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Did you see the video?
Yeah, I've seen the video. So, first of all, I think me and Gasdemap, we usually disagree in many things. One of the things we've actually talked is that Africa didn't have an economy. Actually, Africa did. I feel like, Africa is also diverse. So maybe in West Africa, there's a difference between South Africa, West Africa, East Africa. But I'm from East Africa, and from the history of East Africa, we actually had an economy. It wasn't the mainstream type or the type of economy that, maybe the Western method of doing things, but in the Great Lakes region, really, the economy, what was considered currency, because I've seen here in the video, I've seen in West Africa, the currency was a lot of cowrie shells and a lot of physical. But in East Africa, the currency was cattle, like cows, chickens, sheep, all this. That was the currency. So a lot of trade was happening in terms of cattle. Like you buy something, maybe you get a chicken, you give up a chicken, and you buy something. And in a very interesting way, if you look at it the way inflation and all that, because these animals reproduced, I don't know, it was a very, if you look at it deeper, it was actually a very fascinating way of, it's a very fascinating currency that actually also expands as the population expands. So second of all, there is actually, I'm going to give an example of the Kikuyu economy. That's a tribe in Kenya, the Kikuyu. They actually had methods of literally dividing land, property, division of property, inheritance of property, and all the way till trading and all that, buying and selling. So there are so many methods in which Africans used to trade, because at the end of the day, you can't just live off the land. You have to need that. Trade is just human nature. It's not just African or Western nature. It's just human nature to trade. So to me, one of the things that I found fascinating when I actually read about East African history, let me just be more specific. I even saw that there were, not only did we even have systems of economy, we actually had even war economies, where the people like the US and the Maasai, I know the guys are familiar with the Maasai. Now there were different types of Maasai people. It wasn't just one tribe. They used to be like the Northern Maasai, Southern Maasai, the US and Gishu Maasai. Now a tribe of Maasais, their work was just being mercenaries. Their work was mercenary. So they will fight your war, they will fight your tribal war for you, and you give them cattle. And that's how they managed to amass a lot of wealth during actually the 1800s. It's not that far. It's actually during the 1800s. So the question you asked is, maybe should we go back to that economy? I don't think we should. I think culture is dynamic, right? Like we cannot, the way we are right now, the way Africa has evolved, it's not even that we should, it's even impossible for us to go back. I think we should accept that where we are culturally as a continent, there is no going back. It's always just now. It's just looking forward and adapting to the system that is already here. And I see some African countries like Ghana are trying to adapt even more by backing their currency with gold and using all these creative methods in which they should survive the game that is the current capitalist economy that is. So I feel like we should be doing that. We should be having more creative methods or more innovative methods to succeed in this capitalist globe that, other than going back, regressing to a method that our ancestors used. I don't think that will be good for the whole society as Africa, because it will mean that we have not even progressed. That it's like, because we should always embrace progress. We should always embrace new ideas, because that's how our ancestors did. They didn't just stick to one culture. They've always been evolving and changing. So we should also do the same. And that's my point. So I don't think we should go back. We should all just embrace, and we should also appreciate our history. No, I'm not saying we shouldn't appreciate our history. We should also appreciate our history, the way you've shown that in that video, that I've actually learned a lot of stuff too. So it's always good to appreciate where we came from, not to think of our ancestors as just, also admiring, because a lot of our history is trying to be whitewashed, or is hidden or purposely hidden. And a lot of Africans, not just African Americans or Black people in the globe, the diaspora, but even Africans, a lot of them don't know their history because of colonization. They feel like their ancestors are just swinging on trees.
So you still haven't contended with the idea that so are you trying to tell me that amongst East Africans, they had an idea of political economy, they had the idea of applying Newtonian concepts of physics to human behavior? Because you see, that I think for me, that's where we disagree. The definitions are specific. I'm not going to say Africans had an economy. I can argue they had commerce, or they had commercial activity and commercial relations, but an economy along the lines of the strict definition gave us the concept of an economy. Political economy, you can trace it back to Adam Smith. He codifies it into a corpus, and the origins, you start to see the seeds of it with people like Machiavelli and his writing on the state. You can read Kantorowicz, right? The king has two bodies. So I think the problem is that when we hear economy, we feel like, oh, we're being left out. And it's like, no, we're not being left out. We just didn't have a discourse for it. And that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean we're backward. Even the idea of progress, you should read a book. And tell you one thing about me, anything I tell you, you can check it out. I'm going to always give you sources if you want. Right? There's a great book called The Idea of Progress, and then you should read the other book called The History of the Idea of Progress. Right? You can trace and see that that's something that's entirely, again, a European phenomenon. It's this, again, I can say Newtonian, this idea that things are another person who took it was Malthus, right, where he says population is increasing geometrically while the food production is increasing arithmetically. So it's this linear idea of time. It comes from a European discourse. So again, that's why I push back on you to say, I'm not saying that, people didn't have commercial relations. I'm saying the question at point is, did we have an economy? And if I'm going to use the European concept of economy, they're the ones who are giving us the definitions. We're using their words. We didn't have that. But does that mean we were backward? Does that mean we were inefficient? No. Right? All throughout Africa, you have examples of people having brain surgeries. You have examples of people having vaccinations, right? You have examples of C-sections. So many innovations. Mathematics, you can read Ron Eglash and his work on fractals in the building of African villages, particularly West Africa. You can look at our divination system. So we had all the scientific triumphs and things that we can be proud of. But again, did we have a Newtonian economy? Hell no, we didn't. Did we have an Adam Smith political economy? Hell no, we didn't. But does that mean we were backward? And that's my pushback to you, Tezzy. It's like, I think sometimes you might feel that, no, gas, we did have it. And it's like, we didn't have it. According to their strict definition of what this is, we didn't have that.
Okay.
The Messiah don't have a discourse for that.
Okay. Let me answer you, my brother. I went to a university. I went to African University, right? University of Nairobi. And in my first year, there is the economic history of Africa. That is actually a unit that is taught in the University of Nairobi. Probably most Kenyan university, or even probably most African university, you learn the economic history of your country before colonization. So when I speak, I'm not speaking when I say that there was an economy. This is something that we are taught in the universities by our own professors, African professors, and they discuss this in length.
What's the book?
And
you see what he's done is he's dodged what I said. I'm not debating.
The book is called Economic History of Kenya.
Yes, but Tezzy, listen.
That's the name of the book. I can give another book. Let me give another book.
Okay, give the book, because I want to be clear, because I want you to understand, I am not debating the so-called economic history of Kenya and what you learned in the university, my brother. Please. Sometimes it's like, I don't know if I'm speaking Latin to you. I'm going to say it again. Tezzy, the people who use the word economy, political economy, the origins come from Newton and Adam Smith. There's no debating that. It's not gas them up. I'm not a smart guy. The origins are there. F what any African scholar says. The origins come from the Europeans. So my contention is there is not what that I have seen where there is a discourse where people are applying Newtonian concepts of physics to their commercial activity in Africa. So regardless of what a Kenyan or a Nigerian scholar will tell me that we had commercial relations, yes, trade has always existed, but specifically an economy. And what does the word economy mean? It comes from the Greek word, even though they mistranslated what the Greeks originally meant by economy. The political economy, going back to Adam Smith, the wealth of nations, that is devoid in African discourse. That's what I'm telling you, Tezzy. And I think it's like you ignore it or you're not contending with it. So please don't ignore it. That's what I'm saying. The origins of these definitions, economy, political economy, come from Adam Smith and Isaac Newton. So are you telling me that we have that Newtonian and Adam Smith concept in African systems? Is that what you're telling me?
Okay, first of all, I don't know what Newton said about economy, or I don't know what those guys said. I know what African professors, African scholars say. That's the thing.
Tezzy, so please, I beg you, with whatever you believe in, before you fight gas them up, I get it. I'm dumb. Forget gas them up. But please, you have Google, my brother. Forget the ego. Just humble us.
It's not ego. It's not ego. You learn from those guys. I learn from my own African professors. So we have different sources. That's not. It's not ego or something.
No, it's the ego because, again, I'm telling you that the people who originate what we're discussing come from Europe. And it's sad. It pains me that you're a smart guy. You can open up a tab right now and find out if Gas Them Up is making it up or if it's true. And if it's true, then you can contend with it and say, okay, well, this is what they said. This is what my African professors say. But it's kind of like an arrogance on your part, in my opinion, where it's like, I don't care what they say. This is what the Africans say. And I think that's bad scholarship. And you know it and I know it. That's just bad scholarship.
Okay. I understand but when we're talking about Africa, when you're talking about Africa, who are you going to listen to? Like, are you going to listen to the African professor who has studied all this stuff, or are you going to listen to Newton? I don't know. I don't even know what you're trying to say. You're saying that there is no economy in Africa. If you look at the definition of economy, clearly, I can just Google the definition of economy and see if it doesn't fit Africa. It's not that. But I don't know about the Newtonian or Adam Smith.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. So
an economy. Okay, let me I've just Googled it. An economy is an area of the production, distribution, and trade, as well as the consumption of goods and services.
Tezzy, don't be disingenuous. I didn't ask you for the definition of what Google says an economy is. I'm asking you, I'm telling you, if we look at the history of what we call an economy, The origins, the people who came up with that discourse of the word economy come from Europe. We can find it with Adam Smith, right? The Wealth of Nations, political economy. No Maasai, no Kikuyu, no Oromo, no Yoruba, no Igbo was talking about the wealth of nations. None of them were talking about that.
They are talking about wealth though. Wealth was recognized as a thing. It was a thing.
Wait, you see, this is what I'm trying to tell you. And that's why I gave the example. You see, what you've just done is the same thing that Ajayi Crowther did. He said, oh, the Yoruba, he couldn't find devil, the exact Christian term of devil. So what he was doing, he now says he uses the trickster god Eshu and says, well, this is the closest representation. So yes, we did have devil, and that's Eshu. And it's caused confusion ever since. So what I'm pleading with you, don't make that same mistake. I'm not telling you again that there was not commercial activity, but the idea of a wealth of a nation. Remember, no one had passports. You didn't have boundaries and nation state boundaries that were drawn on a map, right? These things are arbitrary. We didn't have that in Africa. So I'm saying that strict definition of an economy comes from Europe. We don't have that discourse. We may have examples of things.
What is your definition of an economy?
It's not my definition. It's the people who used it. The definition of the political economy, you can go and check Adam Smith. He is the person who puts it in writing in his book, The Wealth of Nations. That is the beginning of what we call an economy. It's not a coincidence, right? Think about it, Tezzy. It's not a coincidence that the first term you hear called millionaire comes from who? John Law, a criminal, by the way. It's ironic his last name was Law, from France. And he is the first person, he wrote a book, him and David Ricardo are the ones who took Adam Smith's work and even pushed it further. They argued for a central bank. They argued about rent. You guys can, you can check this out. These are political treaties. These are all corpuses that they write. No one in Kikuyu land was writing a treatise on how to be a cattle millionaire. You get what I'm trying to say, Tezzy? So I'm not saying it's but like
they were, but you see, what you're saying existed. There were treaties between the Kikuyu and the Maasai, especially when it comes to property.
I mean treaties, like a writing. I don't mean like a peace treaty. I mean like a treatise, right? There was no writing. There was nothing that somebody wrote down on a piece of paper, on a document, right? A corpus that they said, this is a political economy of the Kikuyu. It didn't exist.
But there is writing. There is writing. Oh, you're telling me, okay, let me tell you something. Let me ask you something.
You're telling me now that you can find what the exact equivalent of what Adam Smith and what he copied from Newton, you can find that in Kikuyu land. Are you being serious right now, Tezzy?
No. I don't know. Okay, first of all, I don't know. Okay, I don't know what Newton or Adam Smith.
So
I don't know what you're talking about. But when you're talking about,
why wouldn't you check it out, Tezzy? I've been telling you this stuff.
Let me speak, please.
I've been telling you this stuff for months. You haven't even Googled it once. Isn't that arrogance?
No.
Check it out.
Check it out. About what I've told you. Like, okay, let me say something. Let me say, I don't know about Adam Smith and yeah.
Yeah, Tezzy, make your point, because remember, we have other panelists too, so I got to get to the other guys.
Okay.
So make your point, and then I'll go to the other guys. But go ahead.
Okay, I don't know about Adam Smith or Newton or all these guys you're talking about. I haven't studied their works. But when you give me a definition like treaties that people, I can tell you, oh yeah, that happened over here. When you give me a definition, I will tell you if this happened or didn't happen. But if you just mention names about Newton or Adam Smith, I don't know what they wrote about. So I'm not going to understand what they said is in the African context. But if you give me a definition, I can literally pinpoint to you, okay, yeah, this happened between these two tribes. They had this type of treaty. It involved this amount of cattle and this amount of land. You see, I can give you that. That's all I can say. But in the end of the day, the book is called An Economic History of Kenya. It's the author is William Robert Ocheng and Robert M. Maxon. It was published in 1992. It's a very educative book. It talks about the history of Kenya before even colonization, trade. The other books I can put, like the Southern Kikuyu, the history of the Southern Luo, And I think there are a couple of books I can if for those who I think I'll put it on the comment section. But there are a couple of books you can read about the economics of East Africa or the Great Lakes region as a whole.
All
That's it.
right, drop those titles. Drop those titles for us in the comment section if you don't mind. Let's hear from Yana B. Let's change it up a little bit. Yana B, you saw the video. You've heard the discussions going on. What say you to all of it?
I am pretty much just learning most of this stuff, but to your question that you asked, I think right now we as Africans all over the world practically we're living in a subculture environment, and we live under the premises of capitalism. I, for one, I'm a capitalist, and I'm very proud. Don't say, not to say that if something else comes up where it will definitely benefit my people, I'll continue to be a capitalist, but I'm still learning pretty much all of this, so I'll pass the mic.
Thank you for that, Yana B. I think fundamentally we are kind of asking the question of do we try to get better in their game, or do we try to get out of their game and do our own thing? So that's kind of why I put this up here. Let's hear from Carl. Carl, what say you? Carl, still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry about that. Okay, so cut the volume. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think that we're going to have to change the methods and modes of production that exist currently as we live in, if we want to survive as an organized society as human beings, because capitalism is set up for for the benefit of the 1%. The masses of people don't benefit from capitalism. In fact, the extraction of wealth through capitalism is geared toward omnicide. So I don't have as much knowledge as others about political or how things were fashioned in ancient Africa. They did have they had states, they had governments, so they had to have some method of production. So I think that we're going to have to maybe not. We can't really go back. What's done is done. We can't go back, but I think we're going to have to take that, learn what we can from it, and try to build on that history. Because I mean, as things exist now, it can't continue. I know many of you, my brothers on here, don't agree with my assessment of the ecology and global climate change, but capitalism does accelerate those issues. So even if you don't believe in that, we do have to return to more sustainable methods of production. And I think looking at what was done throughout history in our mother continent is where we should start first. And I'm gonna pass the mic.
Sorry, I was talking with the mic muted. My bad. Thank you for that, Carl. Let's hear from Razuliism.
Political economy. I don't think you could win at their game. You could try. You will win individualistically. And I don't agree with the brother that said we can't go back. One of the symbols in West Africa, the Akan people, is Sankofa. It's to go back and retrieve. So I don't know, but in this game right now, they're too far ahead. And if I was them, I wouldn't let y'all catch up. So what do you think they're gonna let? Why would they let you catch up? So the way to catch up is to confront them economically, which is gonna lead to, you know what? They're not gonna let you control your own national resources without pushing back on you, throwing embargoes, sanction, creating economic hitmans and all of that. So I mean, I think the communal way, I think the group should be over the individual, but that's just me. I don't know.
Thank you for that, Razuli. Real Black Gentleman, what say you?
I mean, I think that I'm what Gas was talking about as far as like West Africa and the communalism. I think, and what the brothers were saying, I think both of them can almost be true at the same time. I do understand communal wealth in the idea that having family wealth and basically clans of collections of families, that kind of wealth, that is beneficial. That thing, that if you have a business and you are able to, adding value is not un-African. You know what I'm saying? Let's be clear. You know what I'm saying? Having value and creating something of a better quality that attracts more people and you're able to obtain a higher return on that is not un-African. I think that can be done collectively. You know what I'm saying? One person can't take care of a herd of cattle going to East Africa. You know what I'm saying? You got to have a whole bunch of people, a whole families to make sure that your various herds are good and taken care of. And adding on to making sure that I think that I'm not sure maybe Tessa can answer this, and I'm saying any people anyone who basically, people are able to breed cattle and to improve the quality of cattle. This isn't anything that you need like Mendel and that hereditary science to understand. I think people can understand dominant strains of things, without referring to Europe. Although there are things that minds do see that other minds necessarily have not seen, perhaps, though it could be a sense that I like to think that in order to build, we're going to talk about force equals mass times acceleration. That if you're going to carry heavy stones, the size of a pyramid, you got to have some basic understanding of that. And that maybe, Newton, Hotep, was around. We just didn't know, a lot of those scrolls that were burnt or stolen in, in the Alexandria or whatnot. I would like to give our people a little bit more inherent credit that we did know mathematical sciences, and that when you kind of are wind up in fights and stuff and you get scrambled, you can't study like you used to, and things are forgotten. And that, and sometimes a lot of that stuff can be kind of, we wind up intuitively building on those concepts through culture. We might not talk about gravity and actually had it formulaically, understood, but we, in our cultures, we understand things go down and the rate of that. We can kind of understand that. I think that, the whole idea of, again, the idea of money as in like a currency, with the cowrie of needing something to tangibly note a value of something, because the value may go up and down a lot more sensitively over time, as opposed to something more close to a barter system where the rates of exchange can be more stably, maybe it's 2 cows per 3 goats, but it might have to be changed where it's 5 cows to 7 goats. The rates can be a little bit more softly adjusted. Whereas if you have fluctuations in prices, the prices go up overnight. And you need twice as many cowrie shells. And I'm just saying that I think that when we're talking about Newton and Adam Smith, again, the timelines of saying that Newton could have influenced the economic climate in Africa, but that couldn't have happened before his birth per se. You know what I'm saying? You can't talk about Newton before Newton, and slavery happened before Newton. They were enslaving them in the late 1400s, 1500s. You know what I'm saying? Newton was born in what was it, 1640, 1650 odd. You know what I'm saying? So like, and then you got to realize he was young, and then he has to go and study, and then be established at the point in which you can say that Newtonian stuff is relating to what's going on the ground at that point in time. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's kind of retroactive to say that, but not to say that there isn't really, you know what I'm saying? It's not to say that Newton didn't influence the policymakers in Europe at that time. You know what I'm saying? Some of them might have thought that he was kind of, he was in England. There's always people who disagree with what people are saying at any given time. And then over time, their studies and their sciences, you know what I'm saying, are found to be more and more refined, to be more and more accurate. I just think that, again, it's like when you're disrupted it's hard to create the kind of like societal stability that says that, you know, we have an economy, or that we are able to objectively circumscribe the terms of which that is. I mean, we didn't necessarily have a central bank, but I'm sure someone in Africa was kind of aware of the valuation of things, as it were. I'm a yield on that.
Yeah, I think what Gas was saying is that we did things differently, and what happens is, as a response to this European encounter, we start shoehorning things that we did, or in fact, they started shoehorning things that we did into their concept, but it's really not the same thing. So I think that's what he was saying primarily. Let me hear from Tanzan. Tanzan, we'll see you.
So thank you, Carl, for putting the definition. It says the last thing that it says about an economy is the management of scarce resources. So in the video, that video was a good one, especially with the emphasis on communalism, which is unfortunately, we have learned to only think of things in terms of language instead of in terms of the concept. And that is why sometimes it is also good to look at things, you know, from outside, because we don't really see how much we are entwined into, you know, our thoughts are entwined into the language. So when we talk about, you know, the basics of the two economies, one is like how Ga said, the crux of the matter is the scarcity. When you're starting from a mentality of scarcity, you're going to have a very different, you know, frame of reference from somebody who's starting from a frame of surplus. So the basics of an economy is scarcity. Even when you look at Malthus with his, you know, there's going to be too many people for the food. It's in terms of scarcity. Everything that they look at is in terms of scarcity. So that mentality alone, before we even get to the barter trading and the currency, it shows you how different, you know, our, you know, whatever, you know, our relationship to wealth was to them. And also, we didn't, I wouldn't say we had currency. We had ways of determining value. Currency is just one way of determining value. You can determine value with different ways, and currency is not even the most accurate one. You know, putting a money value on something on a rock, it could be something that is simply sentimental value, where something that is actually practical, you know, is cheaper. So, you know, even this whole idea of money and value and all that, that's, you know, that's a ludicrous and very temperamental way to put a value to things. So already we have, you know, the idea of scarcity. Then we have this idea of a monetary value. You see, even Tezi, when you're saying, we had currency like cattle, you're making cattle into currency, and that was not it. For example, when dowry, you wouldn't say, you're paying for, you know, the woman. The meaning of dowry would be very different from, let's say, you know, you're not selling the woman. She's, you know, being shown her value. So, you know, if you try to make everything, you know, fit a certain category, you will. Even this whole, you know, capitalism, socialism thing, this is something that some of these Africans who went abroad studied, they found these very cool sounding ideas, and they're like, whoa, you know, and it was like, oh yeah, we do that too, you know. Nyerere was like, yeah, you know, Ujamaa, we practice, you know, our socialism, and they were attracted to socialism and communism because it felt most familiar to what they were practicing. But the Tanzanians who had been practicing that for the longest time, they had not put it down and codified it and given it a name, or maybe they did, but it was more of a practice than you know, a philosophy, a principle, a mentality, rather than let's put it in words and give it a name and you know, kill people overly. You simply practice it. You observe something and then you define it, rather than define something then try to make it into being. You see,
10 is scarcity and limits, is there an equivalent in your opinion?
Yes, 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 of course, because you're always trying to satisfy. It would be like a negative, more like an asymptote. You're trying to fill a void that can never be filled. You're trying to come to, a point that you can never reach, and you're constantly running out of resources. So it's like a negative infinity, just looping on each other. So however much you accumulate, you're still going to have that need, almost in a logarithmic relationship with with your wants. So you'll never be able to satisfy it, because you always start from a point of scarcity. And then the other thing is this, the whole demand and supply. That's the other tenet of this one. We all know, like everybody here knows about the that whole demand and supply lines, where if something goes up, something goes down, blah blah blah. That was also trying to map human behavior on a 2D map, the same way that Descartes was trying to map space-time into two-dimensional. It's handy for a thought experiment, and it works for abstractions, but it's very very way off for humans. There's just too many unpredictabilities, and then on top of that, then you have to factor in the state and government, and then you have to factor in, so those things, it was not accurate to what the data that they were trying to put on paper. So that whole supply demand, I'm not even talking any names, we all know this stuff. So you're trying to make humans, who you already say that they are irrational. That's the whole basis of economics, that human beings are irrational. But then you're putting them on a scale as if they're going to act rationally. Like, that's just a fundamental contradiction within that whole system. You're expecting irrational beings to act rationally, and to say, oh, if the price goes up a certain way, now I will go have, and then you're expecting them to also have infinite knowledge of the market and so on. Most people are simply going to take what they're given and what they can afford. So economists are way off base. And sorry, I don't have my references at hand right now, but I can send you some stuff about how economists are wrong, and they are arrogant, and they don't care about the people that they claim to talk about. They want so bad to have the numbers on their side and to be respected, that they don't really care. They're like those charity workers who go into African nations, those NGOs, and purport to give you that whole, oh, we're here to help, blah blah blah, and they're all rich and going on safaris and enjoying themselves. Meanwhile, they're doing nothing, and they're doing worse. So, okay. So what I can say is the principle of the matter. It's not so much the system that you're under, is the principle. If the principle is communalism, that everybody in the society is supposed to be taken care of, if the widows and the orphans are supposed to be taken care of, then you'll build your economy around those principles. Then you'll say, we'll put some money together, like the Muslims do. They have their own charity fund where they put money together, and they say every one of us is going to be taken care of. Every one of us is going to have a job. We're going to have, businesses. We're going to support each other. Same thing with so many other groups. It's not a new concept. So, that's all the Africans were doing. They were just saying that everybody is supposed to be taken care of. The children, there's not going to be orphans, and we're not going to build orphanages. Children are going to be taken care of within the family. We're not going to have nursing homes and prisons and all these things. This is how we're going to build not our economy. I don't know how you describe it, but that's how you're going to build your society. So once you have your principles, then you build your life around it. I'll leave it there.
I appreciate that, Tan. I really do. I like this, what Lero said in the chat. She says, not understanding the nation game will lead Africans to their demise. I've also been showing the titles of the books Tezzy mentioned earlier. I put those on screen. So if you listen to the playback, just look at the screen. You'll see the books. If you're interested, you can check it out. But not understanding the nation game will lead Africans to their demise. Let me welcome in someone who's nation-minded, last I checked. Oni, how are you this week?
Well, go on, man. I'm cool. I'm good.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Did you see the video?
No, I missed the video. I jumped in on a little bit of the discussion, but I missed the video.
Oh, well, the video was about traditional African modes of production, and the conversation has gone a few different places. It's about the history, the truth of the history. But what are your thoughts about communalism? At least give us that before I move on to someone who saw the video.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say was because I heard the conversation on economics. I want to say this though, because I read Adam Smith. What Adam Smith does, well, one thing that I noticed that Adam Smith said was that he said the three wealthiest nations in history were China, India, and ancient Egypt. And then a part of his study was to look into these different economies, but also I don't think he was dismissive of let's say the urban, like like rural economies, uh, and so on and so forth. So I would not say that uh, that he invented uh, like let's say economics, or but I mean I could see where somebody would say political economics, particularly the field of political economy. I would say that at least for the Westerner, but I could also um, add onto that conversation that the Arabs, although we don't really read them, they did have a lot of like economic literature, like economics related literature, including like conversations that mirrored Marx's description of like not just the alienation of labor, but also what they say I guess the revolution of like labor over the bourgeoisie in a sense. So the Arabs had that, and so I can't say what the manuscripts in Timbuktu were. But one, like when we say what did the East Africans have, the East Africans had a really intimate um, relationship with the Arabs, and then two, when Timbuktu also has like in West Africa also has this deep relationship with the Arabs. And I want to say, just to add on to that Europe during the like right after like during the Renaissance also has this deep relationship with the Arab scholarship. So it's not really clear. Like what happens is that white people kind of whitewash history, and they kind of say, oh, we had the Dark Ages, then the Renaissance, and so on and so forth. But realistically, especially since I don't remember if we're saying that we write in their letters, or we write in their numbers. Yeah, we write in their numbers or something like that. But yeah, like because the Arabs were at one point some sort of global superpower, but like they're kind of written out of like Wazungu's history. It seems like white people, like Europeans, just kind of invented things and nothing else was going on. And I'm not trying to give the Arabs much credit, but what I would say is that, and because I don't think that the Arabs themselves originated this knowledge. What happens is, it's well known that they took over Egypt, and that has like a tremendous factor as well. But I would say that like economies or even like and like if we could read Arab, we probably could say political economies, and then not just that, but like even like religious documents tend to hint at some sort of economy. And yeah, so I would say like that's what I could say to that conversation. As far as communalism, yeah, see, I would have to have seen the video, but I think that in regards to communalism, like it's just another form. It's just another economic form. Like, and that's the thing I want. I want to say that anybody can do any economy. You just need to get a group of people to do it. And that's like one of the things that we tend to overlook is that realistically, you just need a group of people or a nation to go along with something, and then it can be done. As far as socialism is concerned, it's not realistic. But that's just. But I think that also adds to the other aspect to it, which is that we tend to say it's either capitalism or socialism, when realistically that's like, I feel like that's a false dichotomy that Europeans made, because uh, as other people say, if you look up the etymology of capitalism per se, like it really was a word that some satirists made up to make fun of rich people. It's not really an economy. So it really doesn't make sense for anybody to say, like when somebody says, and I'm not really saying anything about, because I only heard Yona say she was a capitalist, and that's fine. But what I'm saying is that usually, like it's a false dichotomy in the sense that when we look into like Adam Smith, for instance, he doesn't like the word capitalism comes much after him, and as well as laissez-faire kind of thing comes much after him, and he wasn't advocating for laissez-faire himself. So it's just like, so I mean, I don't want to say too much, but that's what I like. Like I would say that whatever economy you want to do, I mean, the basics of economy, I think was kind of outlined um by Adam Smith, but like it was pretty much just commerce, and like everybody was doing it, and he also acknowledged that everybody was doing it. Uh, it's not like nobody was doing it. He was just kind of studying different people who were doing it and saying, well, the best way to do it is to practice protectionism, which kind of like parallels, it kind of parallels socialism. But that's but not to the extreme that socialism is a transitory economy to communism.
I appreciate that. Only let's get to Buana. Buana, you heard everything everyone had to say. Now what say
Yes,
you?
sir. Oh, first let me say this. Shout out to Oni Tassetti, the only actor on the panel tonight. Oni, let me just say that, listen, bro, uh, uh, um, Tanzan speaks fluent Swahili. Get with her. She'll help you with that Swahili with a price, of course. But get with her. She'll possibly be able to help you with that Swahili, bro. But a lot
Bro,
of
there's
things
like
were
there's
said.
like 10 women in Tanzania that want to teach me.
Don't even go there. Don't even go there. Don't even go there. Don't even go there. But but let me just first say that I am a private enterprise guy. I'm a private property guy, and I know in this particular room that may I get the knives out of me, I get the arrows out of me because I'm a private enterprise guy. But I believe in private enterprise and innovation. I don't believe in the government basically coming in and reaching into my pockets and telling me what I can do and what I can't do. And even in terms of communalism, because it when you come down to the distribution of resources, even in that situation, they're going to devolve into a bunch of old men telling me what I can't and what I can do with my resources. I don't like that. I don't. I'm sorry, I don't. Now, I understand Koku initially suggested something that it really stick me like a knife in my chest. And I have to think in regards of those who are most vulnerable. Those who are most vulnerable should be provided for and taken care of. The children and the elderly people and the disabled. Of course, they should be taken care of. Of course, they should be looked after. But if you are an able man, I really don't have that same kind of regards towards you because there are many things you could do. Use your brain, innovation, think. What I mean? Come up with something. Cut grass. What I mean? Paint houses. Do something to provide a service to someone in exchange for some kind of currency. Now, for me personally, when Koku suggested what he suggested earlier, I thought about back in the day, a long time ago when I worked at a hotel on a family island years and years ago. And I realized that in a hotel, what they do is they serve their guests, the tourists who come, they may give the residual food to the people who have to work at the hotel, like myself or whatever. And then what they do with the rest of the food is they throw it away. And on an island that is starving or on an island that doesn't have the food that's necessary to provide, the things that they need in terms of nutrition or whatever, to throw away food under the auspices of capitalism, I feel like that is a tragedy. You can't throw away food, man. But that's what these enterprises do. When the excesses of the foods that they have, they throw it away. And I'm saying that why wouldn't you give it to your people? So when he talks in terms of communalism and things like thinking about the community first, thinking about the society, why wouldn't you provide that food, that excess food that you're not selling to your customers, that you're not providing for your labor force? Why wouldn't you provide it for the community in terms of where your corporation exists? So I understand his argument in that. That is a legitimate argument. But I still say laissez-faire. I still say laissez-faire. Leave me alone to do my own thing. Leave me alone to practice personal responsibility for how I am able to function. You know what I mean? I don't want the government in my pockets. If I am innovative, if I am able to provide a service to people and in exchange get resources from that service I provide, give me my money. Give me my money. I don't want other people to decide my fate. No way. I don't agree with it. You know what I mean? This is my problem. But another thing, one last thing. I'm on this. I'm on this. Whatever. But what I would say is, in regards to no, yeah. Don't worry about that. In regards to the economic system that the brothers was talking about, my brother is a brilliant man. He asked him up as a brilliant man. And I listened to what this man has to say. Him, and in particular him and Tan, they are intellectual par excellence. But when we had the discussion before on issue, and the brother had a discussion about that, there were, in terms of Newtonian and Adam Smith, that there were no indigenous economic systems that existed. I actually did my homework on that. And I don't know if he said exactly that, but I did my homework on that. And I found information to the contrary. Now, let me just say this. I would refer him to a paper that I read on about ASU in terms of before cowrie shells that existed in terms of Nigeria. This guy named Hans Sable, he wrote a paper on microfinance in Nigeria. I think that
now, mind for the record, Bwana never sent me this paper, and he has my direct information. So he assaults me with the paper online.
Hear me out, gas. It's my fault. I should have sent you the paper, and it's my fault. All I did was I put the information on the website itself, on the website Bitter Medicine Podcast, and I thought that you would have looked at it. It's my fault. I should have sent you the paper exactly. So it's my fault. It's my fault. I blame myself, not you for it. All I'm saying is that I found alternative information, and just to check it out. Just check it out. Hans Sable, Microfinance in Nigeria, Origins, Options, and Opportunities. I'll send you the paper, and it ain't trying to undermine you. It ain't a slight.
No, if I'm not mistaken, send me the paper. I believe I may have read that article. Send it to me. I may have read it. Here's my thing.
I will send it to you. And I'm trying to slice you because I do have your number.
No, not at all. I'm just being silly. Not at all. But what I'm saying is that
absolutely.
With the idea, see, this is why for me it's we have if it's scholarship, we have to be very thorough and sound. We can't just read historical documents, right? We now have to look at the anthropology reports. Arguably one of the best books on ancient history in terms of so-called economics. You can read David Graeber, may he rest in peace. Ironically, he was one of the guys who was behind the whole Occupy Wall Street thing at the time. And he's an anthropologist that analyzed debt, right? And so what we come to find out is there's a myth that's told in economics that the anthropologist, the archaeologist, and everybody else has not seen. That's this myth of trade by barter. And the reason why it's a myth is because it assumes, or the presumption is, spot trades. And what do we mean by spot trades? Well, those who trade Forex and other currencies, spot trades mean that it's a trade that occurs on the spot. But the reality is, if you're living in a communal village, 9 out of 10 times, you're not trucking and bartering and engaging in spot trades with somebody who is most likely related to you in that small communal village, right? A lot of times it would occur where I would say, hey, Buana, I like that. He would say, sure, have it. And then next time, if he came around me, he'd say, Gas, I like this. And I would repay and say, sure, have that. Now, this idea that people were finding value and saying, oh, well, I can take 10 calories and it's equal to 15 cows. Again, this is why I argued there were no central banks to that. Now, earlier, Oni made some great points. You guys can check out a book called Muhammad and the Arabic Roots of Capitalism. Excellent book. I've said this on this platform before. So-called King Afa of Mercia, right, in England, had a coin where he was trading, and it has Arabic inscription on it, right? So we know that the Arabs played a big role in terms of introducing, quote unquote, mercantilism to the European continent. With that said, the thing is that if you haven't taken the time to read what I'm saying about Isaac Newton and Adam Smith, then it's kind of like it defeats the point. Adam Smith.
Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
No. You are absolutely right. When you come, how you define it in terms of Adam Smith principles and Newtonian principles, they may not be there as in terms of the indigenous economic system that existed within Nigeria. But another thing you said too, because I am not a scumbag, brother. I do have access to you personally, so I will send you that paper, and I would like to know what your thoughts are on that. And you are absolutely right. I should have given, but I put it out there on a bit of medicine. I thought you would have saw it, but I would send it to you directly, and you are right about that.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that I'm not arguing that Adam Smith and Isaac Newton invent this so-called economy, which technically I might be, right? Technically I might be, if you want to hold me to that. Because as a matter of fact, a lot of people don't even know that Isaac Newton was tasked with what? With making sure that the currency of England was free from counterfeiters. Right, so that was one of his jobs as a member of the so-called Royal Science Society. Right, he had access to the Queen. He had access to all these people in terms of his duties and the Royal Mint. Yes, he was in charge of the Royal Mint, and so that is why it's not a coincidence that the economists such as Adam Smith and Malthus talk about scarcity, right? So their premise, right? And so when you think of logic, right, because Newton creates calculus, which is based on logic, and I said 10 is way more advanced than me in these arguments, right? So these logisticians, or however you pronounce them, when they create, a system, their parameters and their structures that you cannot violate. And so one of the tenets of this Adam Smith derived system is that, you have to have scarcity, and human beings are fighting for scarce resources. But there's a great article by the French anthropologist, Marshall, Salins, Sahlins, right? Google that. And he talks about the abundant economy, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've read this stuff. But when you look at that, you start to see that this idea of scarcity is, again, a European phenomenon, because what do we mean by scarcity? So that's why I give you guys practical examples where they'll tell you, oh, prostitution, for example, world's oldest profession. No, that's your women's oldest profession. Your women were busting it wide open in Liverpool and Birmingham and sucking dick and throwing your babies, right? Go on Google infanticide in Victoria, England. Our people were not doing this. right? Hunger. No one was having the discourse that cattle is growing, arithmetically, and human population is growing geometrically, or whatever all these things are. Pardon the noise. Gas is cooking some chicken. Not for me. But the point is that I'm trying to say that we have to really do strong and serious scholarship. We can't just read some sort of historical text and assume that's all there is to know. If we're not juxtaposing that with the anthropology reports, if we're not sitting down there putting those things together, right, and coming to proper conclusions to piece together what was occurring on the African continent prior to our interactions with Mzungus, then we're always going to be caught, as I always say, with Nas, right? He says, you a slave to a page in my rhyme book. So we think we're doing something, and the white man is just laughing at us like, oh, this nigga don't even know he's on page 63 of a 5,000 volume series.
But yes, for me, when I hear the contention that there were no indigenous economic systems, that didn't exist prior to the introduction of things like cowrie shells and things like, I'm thinking to myself, you said that they bartered based on excess.
I never said they bartered. No, I said that again, you see, there is no indigenous economic system because you can't separate economy from politics. That's why it's called political economy, right? Okay. Just like you can't separate philosophy from science. That's why what we call science today was called natural philosophy. You get what I'm saying? We can't separate those two things. They come out of a mindset in Europe. And that's why I say, if we study who Adam Smith was when he writes The Wealth of Nations, people don't know he basically took Newtonian concepts and applied them to his understanding of the so-called political economy. And that is now codified with people like John Law, right? So the French, very, very important people. So that's where we get the word millionaire. That's where we get the word laissez-faire, right? What does laissez-faire mean? Leave them alone. Well, who invents laissez-faire, right? So laissez-faire comes from the French merchants meeting with the people in the French state saying, hey, how do we get revenue? Oh, well, leave us alone. We'll do our business and you'll get the back money, the taxation on the back end. And that's pretty much the arrangement we have today. You see companies like Tesla getting government, grants and all these other things. And now Tesla has this large valuation and they pay taxes and they employ people. So that arrangement is part of political economy. It's not separate. So when I say that African, there's no Oba of Benin who was telling the merchants of Benin, hey, you can go and do this, and then I'm going to tax the people here. Like we didn't have central banks, right? We didn't have any of the underpinnings to have what they have as an economy. Now, we have commercial activity, but again, that was done with excess. So people grew food on their land, they fished, they farmed, they gathered wild rice, they moved according to the rains because you didn't just stay in one locality permanently. You might move to a new locality, you fight, you agree to like each other, you agree to dislike each other, people intermarry, they mix. Nobody was static. That was, if you want to call that an economy. Kind of like what the gypsies in England are doing. That was kind of the norm. So these hierarchical societies, if you want to talk about Egypt, if you want to talk about Ouagadougou or Timbuktu and all these places, they're not the norm for how Africans typically interacted. Africans don't like central hierarchical systems. They don't really like that typically. So that's what I'm trying to back at you guys. Like, don't make the mistake of trying to fit, like they say, a round peg into a square hole. I think we're always trying to fit our African things into European systems. So as Lero is saying, we can play the nation state game. I argue, Lero, if we're going to play the nation state game, let's just entirely make something new. Let's not call it African. Let's just go along and be, these robotics in this nation state, these robots in the nation state. Sure, we need it. And engage with that. But let's not lie to ourselves and say that we're doing something African. Last thing I'll say, Bwana, perfect example of what Gas is saying. There's nothing ancient Chinese about the Communist Chinese Party that they're doing today. Nothing that they're doing is related to Confucianism, is related to Buddha, nothing. It's all Karl Marx with Chinese letters. You get what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely, absolutely. So my question becomes, what? And I'll send you the paper. I promise I will. But my question becomes, why is this economist out of Germany calling ASU an indigenous economic system? Why is he calling that? And I'll send you the paper on it. Because that becomes my question.
Yeah, but again, here's
because
the,
hold on, let me finish. Because he would have read Newton, he would have read Adam. He's an economist. He would have read Adam Smith.
no,
So
that's not. That's an assumption.
It is an assumption, and it's true because I don't have no facts to bear it out. But I'm thinking, as an economist and as a professor in microfinance, he would have read Adam Smith.
Why would a microfinance professor read physics?
No, Adam Smith.
No, think about what you just said, Juan. Newton is in physics.
Adam Smith is one of the quintessential literature in terms of capitalism. So why wouldn't he read that text? So
here's the problem. No, let me tell you why. I want to answer you. Let me tell you. Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. What he wrote before The Wealth of Nations was his interpretation of Newton. So most economists are not going to read, they're just going to stop at The Wealth of Nations. They're not going to read the work prior to The Wealth of Nations, where you see him clearly stating that Isaac Newton was a big influence on him. Now, when you look at his work on The Wealth of Nations and economists after that, now you can say, oh, so Isaac Newton in calculus has limits, and the failed mathematicians, aka economists, have scarcity. So that's all I'm trying to show you.
Like I say, I hear what you say, but I'll have to send you to the documents to let you peruse through it to see where the faultiness is in his arguments. But what I saw is him calling the ASU an indigenous economic system prior to the introduction of cowrie shells. So my issue, not my issue. He did say that.
Again, I agree. Listen, but how? You see, we got to ask ourselves the question: why would you have a system? Because ASU is the idea of borrowing money. If you don't have any money or calories prior to that, what would they be borrowing? Cows?
Labor. His argument is no. Let me ask you the question. Let me ask you the question.
You know what? Hold on. That paper, I think you posted that as a comment under one of the Shoot the Breezes recently. So
yeah, it was on week three. It was like 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. So what we should do, we should try to go over that paper, in a show.
It's only 8 pages.
Yeah, that's fine. That's even better because we can have more people having the conversation with us. But what I want to do now, though, everyone who wants to give a final statement on this prompt, go ahead and give your final statement on this prompt, and then I'm going to go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 3. Whoever wants to go first.
I yield my statement to Tanzan.
I would also like to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Tezzy.
So, okay, first of all, you will notice that in this previous conversation that we've just had from my brothers here, you will notice that not one African scholar was mentioned or was quoted. And here we are talking about the economic history of Africa, right? And I feel like this is a natural bias, actually, an academic bias that happens in the West that maybe even our brothers in the diaspora might not even notice it. That they are quoting all these other guys about the economic history of Africa, yet there are plenty of African scholars, professors, and all that who have done research and have written papers and have written books about the economic history of their various countries down to their tribes. And I feel like if you can't even quote any of them, then you're not talking about the economic history of Africa. You just, I don't know, why you're talking about a Western perspective of the economic history of Africa. That is one point I have to make. Second of all, I also have to speak against the exoticization of Africa, making this trend or a trend in which Africa is seen as exotic, and that these concepts could never occur in Africa. Like all these concepts are so Western, they can never occur in Africa. Yet, when we tell you that this has been occurring in Africa for centuries, it is like as if it's a crime. Like different cultures can't have things in common. Like that's not true. That's not realistic. Cultures have many things in common all over the world. So just economic concepts, one of the things that define human beings as trade, in terms of trade, in terms of currency, really, that it is impossible because you want Africa to be exotic. It's impossible for that thing to happen in Africa. I think we should always move away from that type of concept. So, in the end of the day, I also wanted to address this thing that there was no scarcity in Africa. If you look, I'm going to just give one example. Another one, I know the Maasai are one of the most popular people, so I'll just speak about the Maasai. Maasai actually used to have scarcity in cattle, if people did not understand. And what they used to do, because of scarcity, even the way it defines the eating habits, they drink blood. There's a reason why they drink blood from the cattle. They drink blood from the cattle because at the end of the day, the cattle still gets to live. Because killing cattle, that was considered currency. That there is no African scholar who is going to tell you that it was not considered currency. So for those who feel like maybe that there was no currency in Africa or there was no such thing as currency, that's not true. And you don't need a central bank to regulate currency, especially with currency like when it's in the form of cattle that reproduces on itself, so it grows with the population. There is no need to regulate it. It just grows with the. So in the end of the day, I think those are my final points in this topic, unless there is something else. But yeah,
I appreciate that, Tezzy. Yeah, we're going to move on to topic number 3 in a second. Is there any last words anyone else wants to drop?
Yes. Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So the first thing when it comes to, quoting I'll try to be brief. So if I'm brusque, it's only because I'm trying to, watch for the time. But in terms of quoting the philosophers, it's not to say that, Africans did not have scholars and so on. It's to say this, that if you're going to look at the system, look at, read the instructions from the people who built them. So, that's, what I'll say, go direct to the source. I'm not saying that African scholars do not do good work. I'm sure they do. All I'm saying is that if you're going to learn about the central bank of, Norway, you're going to learn from the central bank of Norway. That's all. The second part about the exoticization of Africa. I'm not exoticizing Africa at all. I'm not making it up to be something, I say that we had our own system. They were just not political and economic in nature. And I was going to say more, but in summary, yes, the Maasais had, agreements and treaties and so on with, their neighboring tribes. But do you remember that song about the, Olonana, the leader of Maasai in 1904, Agreemento? Yeah, when the British came, they were making people sign, people who couldn't even read. That is political economy. They were buying land, whether you understood the buying of land and the selling of land and title deeds. We didn't have those kinds of, political economy is something that at the base of it is bureaucracy. It's somebody has to keep records. Somebody has to make sure that they know it's not just an agreement between two people like, I stole your cows or you'll give me some cows in exchange and so on and we'll sit down. No, they want permanent ownership that is written on a piece of paper, and you have to go to the law courts to get your court. The Maasais had to go and appeal to the United Nations or something to try to get some of their lands and stuff. That's political economy, amongst other things. So no, we didn't have those kinds of system. Hell no. But in summary about even the whole thing about currency, it's not to say that we didn't have a form of exchange of value. And the other thing about scarcity, I wasn't saying that Africans did not have scarcity. I say that they built their society on the principle of surplus. But the other thing that you have to understand, Adam Smith and all these people, the political economy is built on the basis of scarcity, whether that scarcity is a reality or not. In America, people are going without food, they're homeless, but people have a lot of money. The GDP of this country is beyond, the clouds. But somehow there's both excess and scarcity in the same, because once you're operating from the principle of scarcity, you have to maintain it whether or not it's real or not. The same thing with diamonds. Diamonds is an artificial scarcity because that's the economy that is built in under this system. So that's what it means by political economy. It's not just, we are trading, we are treating, and all of that stuff. I'll end there.
Oh, okay. I also have, okay. Can I say, okay, now I have to say something because you've talked about the political, yeah?
You have to keep it brief. Keep it brief.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. In fact, I'm just going to quote a book I've just posted. It's written a prehistoric people living with the Kikuyus. Kikuyus actually did have a system of subdividing land and ownership of land and inheritance of land. So they did have a whole complex system in which land
was as well. And
did they have?
Property.
Did they have
title deeds and a
yeah,
land
when
board?
you own land and you can inherit it, that means I don't know. I don't know. I don't know title deeds. I know
of the land, not just I have the land. Everybody had inheritance laws. I'm saying a piece of paper that you can say, look here, this is the land, and it is this boundary, it goes this way and this way, and I own it. And
okay, so I think the difference is that when you're talking about economy, basically, from what I'm understanding, you're saying is paper, reading and writing. That's the difference between the African economy and the
eventually it becomes paper, but paper is just one of the many aspects. There's contracts, there's legal system behind it, there's bureaucracy, there's record keeping. It's not just we are trading. No, it's not just two people agreeing, let me give you my chicken, I'll give you my cow. No, it's beyond that. It's a system behind it, and it's a system that is okay. No, so sorry, let's maybe we'll continue this another time. But
Tanzan, do me a favor. You're on the Discord. I'm inviting Brother Tezzy and Gas them up. I know a lot of times we don't like to be on too many different apps and all this type of stuff. I'm inviting you all to click the link, join the Discord, and we could continue these conversations in a thread on the Discord. This is the kind of conversation I would actually like. This is why I brought the topic, because I think there's a lot to discuss here, a lot of history and historical facts and whatnot to uncover. So join the Discord. Let's continue the conversation there. So hold that thought, Tezzy. When Tad, I'm going to ask you to, if you can give a follow-up prompt for this prompt, a follow-up prompt that we could discuss next week. You, Tezzy, gas them up, and whoever else could have a little bit more to say about it. But I want to go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 3.